So 15.5 and 6 are famous shlokas too in the Gita. So we start with them today. Geeta Dhyana? Is that sheet there? No. Oh, that one doesn't have.
No.
Okay, Uma Devi, would you take care of that one?
Not either.
Now it doesn't. Oh.
Mine didn't yesterday. Thanks.
Could you go through them today? Okay. O Bhagavad Gita, by which Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which was composed of 18 chapters within the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, who showers the nectar of oneness upon us. O Bhagavad Gita, my affectionate mother, on thee I meditate. All the Upanishads are the cows. The milker is the cowherd boy, Krishna. Arjuna is the calf, and people of purified intellect are the drinkers. My salutations to the Lord, who is the source of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent, and the crippled cross mountains. Hari Om Tat Sat. So, we've been back in this discussion of detach, attach, right? The last couple of days. Detaching from the appearance, from the illusory, from the forms, and attaching to the real and seeing the real. And we had covered in Katha Upanishad really this entry to the realm of the divine, imbibing and seeing the divine in all, actually seeing it, actually encompassing it. Lord Yama was saying in the Katha Upanishad, it starts with seeing the divine, the Lord, back of, behind, underlying the various forms and names. It starts here. These were the last two that we covered yesterday. Its form is not perceived here as such, neither its end, nor its origin, nor its foundation, nor its resting place, having cut asunder this firm-rooted ashwata tree with the strong axe of non-attachment, then the goal should be sought after, where, having gone, none returns again. I seek refuge in that primeval Purusha, from which streamed forth from time immemorial all activity or energy. So a recognition of the causeless cause underlying, which is the one reality, underlying all of this, and cutting the tree at the root means non-attachment to the forms as some independent reality, because they're not. It doesn't mean denial of what's underlying the form. In fact, it allows you to be present with what's really here. So there's a lot of suffering. There's so much suffering in the world. This war in Ukraine now going on 3 weeks. Yesterday, a bombing of a theater, which is, and underneath the theater is a bomb shelter where maybe 1,000 people were holed up. And so much. And yet, what is it that's being killed? And this is the lesson in the Gita. And it's not to breed an indifference. It's not to breed an indifference. It's to allow for real love and bringing the light into the suffering and the cause of suffering and within ourselves and within all. I'll share a little story, and most everyone here has heard, but you haven't. So, and maybe someone joining us online this morning hasn't. When I first went to ashram with Swami Premananda and Swami Ramaswarupananda both, I felt such love, and I observed that everyone was loved in this way, that no one was, people were doing stupid things, and stupid things would always get corrected. But my experience in being greeted in the ashram was such love. And the first thing Swami Premananda would always ask is, have you eaten? And tea and food would be offered. And it's very lovely, in fact, that in this ashram, what you're greeted with is tea. And that's intentional, and it's also divine. So when I went back the last time that I've been to India, Swamiji had a dog. This is what it looks like. And the dog's name is Batu. And Batu was a big dog, beautiful dog, very regal, one of the Alaskan or northern kinds of breeds with the tail that curls up, and he was black with a white star on his chest. And he was the dog of dogs. He was the king of the dogs in the village. All of the dogs, you could see them prostrating to you if you really saw the relationship, because they all came and fawned on him, and they all sought acceptance from him. He had come into the village mysteriously, and he'd gone straight to the ashram, and so he knew something. And immediately Swami Premananda took him in, just like anyone who presented themselves, and gave him so much love. And I hadn't seen him. I just heard I was there when he was there, and he had come a few months before I had returned. And what we observed is that not just was he king of the dogs, but when Swamiji had the ability to pay some attention to him, he fawned over him, and he would go outside. Swamiji has a very busy schedule. He's up early and chanting, observing the morning service, and then at night he's with the sadhakas watching cricket or something like that on TV. And in between, the day is full. He teaches 3 or 4 hours a day. He oversees the office, and he meets every guest that comes and like this. And so, but every day for some time, he would go out in the middle of the day in the morning and also in the afternoon, and he'd step outside, and he would call the dog, and he would yell, "Batu!" at the top of his lungs, and Batu would come running, tail up, so excited to see his master. And Swamiji would pet him and give him so much attention and love, and then biscuits, and Batu would sit right at his side, and Swamiji would sit in a chair right at the entrance to the ashram and give him biscuits and talk so lovingly with him. It was not different really than the way he treated any of us. And so much love. And one day, Batu was playing with another dog in the village on the street and got run over. And he died. He left the body immediately. And so people at the ashram were very concerned. People heard about it, and the discussion, people talk, and the discussion is, I wonder if Swamiji knows, I wonder if he's heard. And then people would see Swamiji, and apparently he hadn't heard because he was completely undisturbed. And so the day went on, and we were in class with him, and he was his normal cut-up self. He calls the Yoga Vasishta joke Vasishta, and he's always laughing, always joyous, Swamiji. We never saw anything that took him out of that bhava, out of that place. Now, of course, when someone has a problem, he's present and very loving and attentive, but inside bubbling with joy, and that is always clear. If you want someone to cheer you up, you go see Swamiji, and he'll help you bubble yourself. And so it became apparent through the day that he knew. And so this, right? So complete and absolute detachment with the form. He had cut the tree. And in cutting the tree, he was able to be with the presence in an undisturbed way. No one could do anything or say anything which would result in anything other than love. Completely non-reactionary, acting, but never reacting. And acting in accordance with the circumstance, not reacting in accordance with what someone did. And he would be quick to correct a child or a sadhaka or anyone. And it would sound like sometimes when he was correcting you, he didn't love you. That's the child's view of love, that it's always sweet and all of this, you know. When mother corrects the child, it's not always sweet, is it?
Yeah.
No. But it's still love.
Yeah.
Yeah. So never anything but love. And in a way you could say detached, but really attached. So present with the presence. Present with the presence. And so we use this as a living example, as it were. It's not, people who might say, but don't you get upset about this happening or that happening? Well, does it throw you off? Does it disturb you? If you see what's here, if you recognize what's here, and if you relate to this and you attach yourself to this, then whatever happens won't disturb. It won't throw you off. You won't lose love. And what does that allow? If you want to talk about it from a practical sense, that allows you to be one with unconditional love. To love completely and absolutely without condition. And never to be thrown out of it. Never to have it interrupted, as it were. So it's not, so in this way, the fruit of detachment in this way, it's not indifference. Swami Venkatesh had raised this point a couple of days ago. It's not indifference. Indifference is a whole different story. Indifference is trying to cut yourself off instead of opening to what is. Does that make sense? Opening to what is and finding your own root in what is, not in the appearance, then you've opened yourself. You haven't cut yourself off. Okay, so we continue in this vein. And that actually allows us to be of support to those who suffer here. Ultimately, the suffering, of course, there are all of these levels of suffering, but ultimately suffering is emotional. It's not physical, you know. Ultimately, suffering is not pain. They're not the same. Yeah? It's an emotional pain. And it's an emotional pain that ultimately is related to identification, not to, right? And the longing for something that doesn't exist, not in the way that we imagine it to exist. And the longing covers up what does exist. Right. Yeah, we laugh. Yeah, it does. It does. Whenever you're looking for something, that means you imagine that you don't have it.
If I didn't use me, my kind of wording, like if I never said this is my dog or
would never happen.
Yeah.
Would never happen.
Never use those words. Like, would it be helpful to parents?
Yeah, nothing is mine.
This is my child. I'm just.
Well, it's God's child.
Yes, it's God's child.
It's God's child, and that elevates the child right away.
Yeah.
You know that, don't you? Oh. Okay. So we'll read number 5 and then this beautiful commentary from Swami Chinmayananda. And it speaks to what's coming from this, but also practice. Free from pride and delusion, victorious over the evil of attachment, and obviously with the form, with the name and the form. And evil, not in a judgmental way, please. Evil here, the word evil really means to take you away from happiness, that which takes you away from happiness. It's not different from sin, really. It's the same. You could say separation from God, or that which separates you from God. But God and happiness are the same thing. And they're interchangeable words. So, the victorious over the evil of attachment, dwelling constantly in the self, capital S self, their desires having completely retired. A good translation. The desires having completely retired, freed from the pairs of opposites, so freed from seeing this existence as north, south, east, west, everything relative to something else. Such as pleasure and pain, the undiluted reach the goal eternal. And Swamiji says this. He says, philosophy in India is something to live and to practice. Have you been to India? So if you reflect, I feel like you see what he's talking about. In the West, philosophy seems to be something to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But in India, it's something to try to live, to try to embody. In much of society still, it's the case. Which is why we'll see such humility, generally speaking, going through the culture, in particular in the villages. Humility doesn't actually come that easily. It has to be cultivated. Yeah. He says, ultimately it is fulfilled only when we come to experience its goal. And it is natural, therefore, that in our scriptures and spiritual textbooks, we find a wealth of instructions and elaborate discussions on the theories of perfection. In the East, generally speaking, India, it's accepted that one can be perfected. Perfection would only happen with perfect surrender, accepting that the divine is perfect already. In the West, it's the notion when Jesus says, be ye therefore perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, it's scoffed at. But in the East, it's taken. Now, that's not a geographic thing. What that really means is the one who's living an intentional life, taking the highest as his or her goal, does strive for perfection. But it's not the perfection that we had tried to attain to before, right? By being seen as being perfect. When we lived life and everything was objectified, then it was about how we were seen that we imagined would give us happiness. And it felt like it. When someone says something nice about us, it seems to be good and right. And when someone says something not nice about us, it seems bad and wrong. This is ragadvesha. This is when we're attached to the forms and what people say and what people do, and with the notion that perfection means being seen as perfect. So I act in a way in order to be seen the way I want to be seen. So born of delusion. So he breaks down the portions of the shloka. Starts with free from pride and delusion. Both these qualities of pride and delusion indicate a false, exaggerated estimate of oneself and of others. Erroneous estimate of one's own importance is called pride, and it brings about an enormous amount of heavy responsibilities upon oneself to maintain it. There is no time thereafter, because we have to keep up the image, right? There is no time, and we're reminded, is when someone says something that sounds negative, then we're reminded how we have to keep up the image. We might even cut someone off because we feel that they don't value us properly, right? So he's sharing, it's really hard to maintain it, so you don't have time for anything else. Yes? Because you're always on the defensive. You're always wanting to make sure that a crack doesn't come in the veneer. But meanwhile, inside, the temple is empty. So appearance, living this appearance, and to maintain it, you have to be on guard all the time, right? Huh? Yeah, you have to have the hair just so. Yes, dear? Because that's what people see. Huh? And it doesn't feel good if they don't like me. So if there's something wrong with the hair, then they don't like me. And it feels good if they like me. So if it's just right and there's a bow or whatever, right? You know. And not just the appearance, but what you say, the job that you have. Is it acceptable? Is it seen properly like this, right? Look at how much motivation we have in order to appear a certain way around the job or the way we're with children or... So all built on this delusion. And so no time for anything other than that. Mm-hmm. So it brings about an enormous amount of heavy responsibilities upon oneself to maintain it. There's no time thereafter to cultivate oneself or to seek knowledge or to get truly educated. Similarly, error in judgment regarding things and beings, happenings and situations in the world outside is called delusion. It makes us live in a false world of our own imagination without actually facing the immediate problems around us as they really are. And then with the evil of attachment conquered, he speaks of, to live in the flesh, seeking our life's fulfillment only in the joy derived from our contact with the sense objects in the world around us, is to live in the outer layer, cheating ourselves of life's deeper possibilities. Such an ignorant fool gets extremely attached to the objects of the world, and once this attachment has grown, all of his attention in life will be irresistibly turned towards those objects. Shackled by them, ever dancing to the rhythm of change and destruction, she comes to waste her powers without ever realizing the nobler purpose of life divine. Ever dwelling in the self. Detachment from the world of objects is never possible without attaching ourselves to something nobler and diviner. The human mind, intellect, equipment can exist only in the positive contemplation of some object. It cannot remain in a void of not contemplating anything. So this is key if we're to come out of this humiliated state of addiction to objects. It doesn't make any difference if we're addicted to sex or relationships or drugs or alcohol or tobacco, or it doesn't make any or cereal. It doesn't make any difference. Addiction to an object is addiction to an object, and the effect of it is the same. Some of them are socially acceptable. You won't get thrown in jail for a cereal addiction, Kartikeya.
So they're more dangerous, perhaps.
Still suffering.
Yeah, so, which by the way, could mean exactly what Nathan just said, which is it's more dangerous.
Right.
Because people around you won't try to save you from it.
There's no power. You don't see it. You don't see it because it's nothing.
Or won't try to punish you for it. And either one of those could help you to come out of it.
I mean, even on TV, Seinfeld advertised it. He had cereal. Every time Seinfeld,
See?
whole cabinet of cereal.
Yeah. There you go.
Yes.
And with this addictive personality, we can always justify any addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like that.
Just like that.
Just like that. And if you actually see that an addiction is bad for you, and you choose to eradicate it, then it will be replaced by
Toast.
another addiction. Another addiction. So,
Gotta have the higher addiction.
yeah. So you have to, this is the point. This is the way the mind is. So the only way out of it is to be addicted to the eternal.
Nice.
You see.
Yeah. Or the harmonium. Practicing harmonium.
Even then, it will break, my dear.
Yeah.
One of the reeds will start whistling.
Change will occur.
No, anything. And this is fundamentally the way the mind is. Because the mind is part of something. The mind is not in and of itself a thing. And as long as it is having to endure a separate existence, the mind itself will constantly seek that which it's a part of. It's like taking the baby, the ever baby, away from the mother and hiding the mother. So the baby will ever look for the mother, even with a baby that's adopted, for example, and years later on, adopted, will ever look for the mother. So mind, baby. Mind, child. And so having been pulled away, as it were, by going outward instead of in, and just like the ray of the sun, get far enough away, forget about sun. In the same way, you get far enough away, forget about one, forget about God, and then try to find the mother in the sense objects, in the relationships, in whatever, emotional, physical, all of these are objects. Right? So the cure is simply addiction to God. That's the only cure. And that is the cure. That is the cure. Is to identify, to recognize the eternal here, always present. Identify and recognize the relationship, and go home. And be ever at home when going out. Huh? Their desire is completely at rest. Desire is the function of the intellect. When the intellect desires, the mind starts contemplating upon the desired objects. As the desire, so the thoughts. Therefore, the intellect should be disciplined not to desire the finite joys arising out of the ephemeral sense objects of the world. When the desires have ended, the mind becomes still. In the yogi, capital Y yogi, the naturally desireless state. Because, yeah, it's obvious, right? Why? So people will wonder, how can you be without desire? And the only answer would be is that you have what you desire.
You don't need anything, you're good.
He's satisfied.
then you're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you're good.
You're satisfied.
You're good, yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't, no water, this is pilgrimage stuff. No water, fine, I'm fine. Pain for a little while, hydration, maybe go a little crazy, but I'm still fine.
Shut your eyes and always.
Come around this corner, car run you over, I'm fine. And this is an inner conversation that would happen because the fear would arise and the intellect was getting more firm. And I would say inside to the fear, I'm fine. What do I need? So this is this process of actually the intellect becoming firm in it. That's the practice that our dear Yashoda is involved in. And oh my, she got a big test yesterday. I'll just leave it at that. Oh my.
It's the gift.
Oh my, that's a big one. But she is doing well with it.
Yes.
So the desire is completely at rest. It will happen, but also the practice, as we begin to see, catching that and letting them be, letting them go. Released from the pairs of opposites like pleasure and pain. When the body comes in contact with a sense object, it is the mind that comes to experience, as it were, the final result of the contact as pleasure or pain. Once the mind starts recognizing this pair, then it's natural for it to revolt against pain and instinctively seek pleasure. Unfortunately, in this mad onrush of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, there's no stability, for the very things that constituted joys yesterday prove to be sources of sorrow today. To cater to the whims and fancies of such an unsteady entity is to barter away our chances to bring about any cultural unfoldment in ourselves. It's becoming a victim, right? Relying upon an external state that can't, by nature, it can't stay the same.
Yeah.
But it's also delusion in here, because what we discover is that the objects don't contain pain and they don't contain pleasure. The objects are neutral. We were talking a couple of days ago that we're infusing them with something, but in the mind, only in the mind.
Found that I'll have like this like very anxious, like the impending logistic state coming.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's usually accompanied by a wave of external like options.
Yes.
Oh, this, do this.
Yes.
Oh, get this, and then you're just like, none of this is gonna work. you think it, it's an option like.
That's process of awakening. What you're describing, it's exactly what it is, because the intellect is starting to recognize, right? So you see it arising. The desires. It's an old tape, yes? And it's starting to look at the options. What could it have?
It's like a monkey banging cymbals or like a puppet show or something. It's like a bunch of stuff that seems like it'd be good for a moment.
Yeah.
That one moment,
Right.
Maybe, but it's not gonna.
Well, and it's not even. The whole process just exists in the mind, and the pleasure and pain only exists in the same place. Yeah. Have you ever noticed? Have you ever had an experience that was very painful and then it switched?
Yes.
And it became pleasurable? I can think of so many of these.
I was thinking when I got hit by a car in San Francisco, and I flew up so high. When I came down, landed on my head, but all I saw was bright light, and then bliss. I was laying on the ground like,
See?
I didn't even care about my neck. My neck could have been broken. I think my neck might be broken. I don't even know.
Oh, thank you, critic. Yeah. So, and the stanza concludes by a positive and optimistic declaration, having in its force and style the vehemence of a commandment when it says, "The undiluted reach that goal, eternal." Consciousness expressed through matter vehicles is the miserable one, torn by his own stresses and strains, and the same consciousness, gathered from these vehicles and experienced as such, is the divine moment of infinite realization. So, same consciousness, the same I, when all wrapped up and identified with the objects, suffers, and the same I is free of suffering when it gathers itself and lifts itself up. This is yoga. Okay, any comments or questions?
Got to experience 2 of those this morning.
Yes.
2 thoughts that were like just changed my whole perspective and threw me in a hole. But I'm kind of just contemplating, looked over them in a different light, and they changed. And one of them was kind of like what you're saying about not disattachment, but the difference between disattachment and
Indifference.
yes.
Yeah, detachment and indifference.
I experienced that.
Oh,
Yeah,
you want to share?
no.
Okay, very good. No worries, no worries.
You want to share one?
You don't
I
need
had
to.
in my meditation that the example of one experience that is just shifting the perception of that. Like I will put it back in Australia. I will put my little one to sleep, and I will fall asleep with her.
Yes.
And I will get so angry for that, and I carry that until today, because I failed to do other assignments or just.
Yes.
And last night I fell asleep and I didn't brush my teeth, so I was angry for it, and so that brought me back to the same, like falling asleep and not achieve, like doing something I wanted to do.
Yes.
And I thought, well, Fiorella was needing me, and she felt safe when I was with her as she fell asleep. So I was just really going through behind why was I there.
Yes.
And made me really feel so much relief that the reason why I was carrying the anger is because I didn't finish my degree. So it was now doesn't even matter, but I have that connection with my daughter.
Oh.
And I mean, so many thoughts that came just shifting the perception of relief. That falling asleep was far better than.
Oh. Well, it is what it is.
Yeah, it was not.
It is what it is. It is what it is. And in this delusion, we're living somewhere else, or we're trying to live somewhere else other than here. I mean, with whatever happens, there's always the opportunity to learn and adapt and adjust and accommodate with it. And that's as simple as a resolve and living the resolve. But the rest of the tape is related to this feeling of accomplishment, a personal accomplishment, and what's needed. And if you play it out and look at it, in order to what? And it will always be in order to be happy. So situations are always giving us opportunities to learn. In other words, you can learn, but the whole environment that you're describing is a bonus. Unneeded. Born of delusion. Born of delusion. And that environment changes through a full and complete attachment to the real, and a letting go of the appearances as an independent reality. Oh. And of course, everything is to be accepted, even within ourselves. But having accepted that it arose, it's possible in this moment to begin a new life. Right? And then it's all just learning. Learning continues. Learning, as long as one is in relationship with this body, learning is always continuing. And if we stop learning, then we've once again come back into a place of constriction. We've constricted ourselves. We've once again accepted bondage. Who's learning? Well, learning is a process that naturally occurs within nature. Adaptation, you can call it adaptation. Where in Serve, Love, Give, we have adapt, adjust, accommodate. That's one of the lines. So always adapting, adjusting, and accommodating. To who? To an expression of the divine. Kartikeya.
I always think a great example of this is when you accumulate all this furniture and great things, but then you have to move, and all you have is a small car or something, and you have to sell everything. And then you realize, oh wait, I still have myself, and there is still God and all this attainable bliss. So I'm like, oh, okay, I still have things. Especially when you lose your phone or your wallet, you're like, okay, come to peace with this and that.
What about when you forget that it's trash day? How about that?
It's still,
That too, huh?
still peace. Like this time, I forgot to go bring the garbage can. Everything is like
Okay.
That's the hardest one.
Okay, good. I'm happy that you're still at peace. But learning is required.
Yeah.
This is an example of what we mean.
Yeah.
But learning is required. Indifference is not acceptable.
Good example.
Thank you for providing the example this morning. Huh?
Does it pick up the trash anyway, even if it was not full?
No, dear. That's the reason you go out there.
Dang.
Yeah, good thing was Swami was driving back by them yesterday evening,
No.
and so pulled them all out.
Oh, you did?
But
Yeah, I remember.
but your peace doesn't have to do with Swami pulling them out or not. The peace is who you are, so you're allowed to be at peace
Yeah,
and yet still learn
right.
and use a calendar.
Yes.
Oh, your dentist appointment.
Good memory.
And see, we support each other in this way.
Tuesday.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, let's close with final prayers in RT, page 174. Om Trayambakam Yajame Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyamam Mritat Om Trayambakam Yajame Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyamam Mritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mritor Mokshiyamam Mritat Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Shantu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashantu, Makashi Dukhabhave, Asatoma Satgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mritor Mahamritam Gamaya, Om Purnamida Purnamidam Purna, Purna Mudashate, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vasishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto thee. Thou art and omniscient. Thou art Satchidananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold Thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve Thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember Thee. Let us ever sing Thy glories. Let Thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in Thee forever and ever. On below Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki, and for all of the saints and sages of all the traditions.